Well, hello, faith families. I'm joining you now for our online reflection, but this one is a little bit different, and I'm going to explain to you why. First off, I was talking about Jesus at the wedding in Cana in the Gospel of John, chapter 2. And as you're going to see in a few moments here, we're talking about the idea of fun being sacred, and sometimes we overlook the spiritual importance of having fun. I had a really great reflection, sort of talking about how important it is to laugh together, to enjoy things with each other, even sometimes more, irreligious kind of elements that make us laugh, because there is nothing more powerful than trying to stifle a laugh in church. That is one of the most powerful forces ever, is when you find something funny at a time when you're not supposed to be finding stuff funny. That's truly powerful. So I had this whole great idea, but here's what's different about this reflection. While I was on that, my children were off to my right-hand side, and they were becoming so disruptive that it actually threw me off, and I couldn't remember how to finish up the message. So, what you're about to see will be the beginning parts of it. Then it's just going to shut off. Don't worry, nothing wrong is happening. I'm sparing you from having to see the train wreck of the last few minutes of this message. But what's going to happen instead is you're going to hear a recording of the discussion we had about this at Westover and some of the wisdom from the community there about the situation, because those of you who are at Mountsburg got to see Andy and I try to parent in real time from a place of frustration, anger, and disappointment at the behavior of our children. But I am struck with this, that in a message about fun, I think about Jesus when he was dealing with his disciples who were also trying to get unruly children to line up. Jesus' response was, whoa, 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 what are you doing? Let the children come on to me. And that struck me even in the moment, so I found myself very conflicted, not sure what to do, not sure how to go forward. Everybody there was so wonderful and understanding, and as you're going to hear from Mary Boyd at Westover, just asked me a very simple question. If these weren't your kids, how would you respond? And that's exactly right. So thank you, Mary. And I was also struck by Marty Adams at Mountsburg, who said, what's funny about this is you were doing a whole message on fun and your kids got bored. So it was a really powerful and I think important reflection. So I'm going to show you the parts right up until it just sort of cuts, like it derails, and that's when I'll cut off. And then hear the discussion afterwards, because this is something we're going to pick up a little bit more in the subsequent online reflection. But here it is, my absolutely ridiculous message on fun that fell apart because as I was preaching about the importance of fun, I ended up getting too boring. It's beautiful, it's wonderful, this is why we're families together, because none of us have the answer, but what actually ended up being really sacred was the reflections that happened afterwards and the grace that all of you extended to us as we tried to parent and help me have some really great conversations with my kids afterwards. So enjoy, here it is. How sacred is fun. More sacred than I was able to communicate. You will note the picture in your bulletin. It is designed hopefully to instill some joy in you, just what looks to be like a smiling dog. Dogs are just such source of joy and love. We have prayed for a few animals in the congregation, and of course our wonderful Mary, who has dedicated a substantial portion of her life to caring for our fuzzy, furry friends. Francis of Assisi, she is. She definitely keeps the spirit of Francis alive in our little congregation today. But what I want to focus on in this passage where we see Jesus turning the water into wine, his first miracle, is to reflect a little bit on, is there something sacred in fun? Because if we're not careful, we can fall into the idea that fun is a diversion, that fun's not really what we're about. And there's lots of teachings about that. Not too many people in the broader world would be like, church is fun. And that's fair. There's a complexity of stuff that's going on here. But I want everybody here to think that within these walls, we've had moments of fun. We have laughed. We've laughed and enjoyed and bonded with each other over a bunch of
silly stuff. One of the most powerful forces in the world is being in church and finding something funny that's inappropriate and then trying not to laugh. Good luck. I'm going to tell a story which may embarrass my mother, but it's one of my fondest memories of my mother. The church I went to as a young man, and she should embrace this. The church I went to as a young man, we would have once a month in the evenings, or when it was required, there would be a baptism. In the evening, there would be a baptismal service. And for one of these services, this church did not have a baptismal tank, so what they would do is they would rent a hot tub, and the front of the church was very much covered in carpet and stuff like that, so they would rent the hot tub, and then, of course, they'd lay down the plastic sheets to protect the carpet. We all know that. And at the front, basically where the pulpit is, it was the 7 stairs that led down to where everybody else sat. And so this Sunday night, there were several baptisms. But one baptism above all was very, very popular. These were not big services. But this one, there probably was, in my memory, we'll just say this, a couple hundred people there. Because one of the people getting baptized was a young man whose name shall remain, we'll call him Clint. You know what? There it is. Clint, that's not his name, was being baptized. This young man was 17 years of age, had had a very rough life, including several stints on the street, was being fostered by a family in the church, had joined the youth group, was a personal friend of mine, and looked at my family as his second or third family. They're very close. They would come over all the time. We spent a lot of time together. He was a good friend. And he decided from his time in the youth group that he was going to be baptized. And this was wonderful, and it was beautiful. And so we were in the very front row, along with the family that was fostering him, and a couple of his closest friends from the youth group. It was very emotional. Like I said, almost the entire church showed up to celebrate Clint's baptism, his acceptance into the community. So go up there. He's the final one to go. And I mean, what we were talking about before about not necessarily elevating people over one another, but they kind of made Clint the star of the show for this baptism night. So he was the final one. Now, this is a very important point, not just theologically, but physically, because you have to understand that the plastic was wet. Okay, the engineers in the group are already starting to smile. And yes, foreshadow. He gets up there with the robes on. It is beautiful. He reads his testimony. It is heart-wrenching. There's very few dry eyes in the place. It is a very emotional, wonderful moment. Thank you for accepting me. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for the many moms and many dads that I've met in this church. Thank you for my friends, somebody who didn't have a family. And then the baptism happens, and it's beautiful. And this was the late 80s, so he had quite the mullet. He had quite the short hair on top, quite the long hair. So his glorious flowing hair was all wet. It was beautiful. Something biblical in its case. Something biblical. And everybody was moved. And he gets up and he walks to the front and everybody's clapping happy and stuff like that. And this reverend sinks over and he takes his first step and slides. And but slid down and went, and made that sound, and hit every step on the way down. And everybody went, oh! With the exception of my mother, who, to be fair, it was one of the funniest things any of us had ever seen, and the moment was, and she cried out in the church, I almost said his actual name. It's even funnier. Well, no, okay. Clint! And bust out laughing. Because how do you not? And then everybody else started laughing, and we never saw him again. The kid never, I'm kidding. Everybody's joined. It became this shared moment. We talked about it afterwards. It was a wonderful party afterwards, and that's it. But the point being, we all got those stories when something is said or done in church, and we want to laugh at it, and we feel like we can't, and it will set anybody off. It is the most powerful force, and I want us to embrace that as a sacred moment. Teresa Gumby, to put you on the spot, but the camera will stay where it is. You've referenced many times The Chosen as a show that you particularly love, right? If I may, what is one thing that you like about the depiction of Jesus in the show The Chosen?
Drawing closer to me.
Yeah. Okay. So if you couldn't quite hear that, as powerful and as mighty as he's depicted, which is, what I think you're right. The not so secret sauce, but what the focus on is how profoundly and beautifully human he is. How much joy he brings to life, how much fun he has with children, how he's joking around. He had a lot of charisma. Sloan, turn around. He had the riz. I just wanted to make sure that he heard that, because that is terrible. I know, I didn't like saying it either, but that's what you get. He was very charismatic. We know this from reading the scriptures. Who were the people that liked him? Who were the people that gravitated to him? Who were the people that were touched by him? And I don't want us to move past that, because his teachings were profound. He was a storyteller. His miracles were awe-inspiring. But it was his humanity, his ability to take very complex ideas and live them out, but also his ability to just be engaging, to have fun, to reserve judgment. And again, I don't know how many more times I have to say this. Who are the people that received the majority of his judgment? Well, the very serious religious folks that had put all the weight and the stock into people doing life just like this. And one of the things that Jesus offers is a variety of experiences of life, a wonderful ability to observe the sublime and the ridiculous, and see both of them as communicating his dad. I was going to say this is a spoiler, but it's not a spoiler, because you should know the gospel stories by this point. But I saw a beautiful clip from The Chosen, and it has to do with John the Baptist, the death of John the Baptist. So I don't know if any of you have seen that. You can pause this and watch that, but again, it's not a spoiler if you know the gospel. And John the Baptist is in his cell. He's in Herod. We know this. The dance happens. The order's been put down that he's going to have his head delivered on the silver platter. And the guard is polishing the platter. It's a great moment, because it's one of those stories I've read countless times, but having a few minutes to sit in it was powerful. And John the Baptist just asks about this material. He's like, it's a silver plate. He's like, it's reserved for wedding banquets. And John the Baptist chuckles. And the guard's like, why are you laughing? He's like, I've never been invited to a wedding banquet. He's like, and I'm about to go to my first wedding banquet. And then he starts to laugh. And the guard asks him, what is he laughing about? And he looks at the guard and he's like, you wouldn't understand. He's not talking about Herod's wedding banquet. He knows his time's at hand. And the celebration, his understanding of the kingdom he's been serving, is that metaphor, that analogy, that picture that is throughout the Hebrew scriptures of a wedding, a celebration of love and families coming together. And it is a beautiful ending, because he sits there and he's got his head on the chopping block, and there's only one window in the whole room. And he looks out that window, and the sun comes up. And you see the sun glow on his face, and all he sees is one little lamb walking on the horizon. And he smiles, and his last words are, thank you. The Christian message in its first 3 centuries powerfully changed the greatest empire the world had ever known. Not through military success, not in any one person's lifetime. It took 3 centuries, generation after generation after generation. And they did that because the people who followed Christ lost their fear of death. Because they had the proper sentences, the proper doctrines, the proper understandings, partially. But what they had was the resurrection of Jesus. The loss of death brought a profound level of joy, comfort, stability. Everything we worry about, everything that holds us down, everything that induces fear in us, they lost. They found new, creative, exciting ways to understand the world, to serve others, to go boldly into this world. And it's really hard for us to duplicate that 2,000 years later in this part of the world. And I appreciate that. But there is a deep, sacred element to this that reminds us that fun, enjoyment is a powerful motivator. That's something that inspires us internally is more than just the academic. I'm going to pause for a second. But while I'm sort of sharing on this tricky part of how important, like how much fun it is that Jesus' first miracle, 1, involved alcohol, 2, prevented really important religious structures. Like we're all familiar with the idea of like sort of being separate from the world, and then he prevents that from happening. And while that's happening,
my own boys were so disruptive and so problematic that I lost my train of thought and couldn't finish the message. Like, I mean, it came off the rails, and I tried, I stepped, I reflected, and then I got this good, like, 4 or 5 minutes of, and then I realized, I'm like, I'm just saying words now. Like, I've completely lost the plot. And in
Speaking in tongues.
like tongues that even the Lord's like, huh. Like,
What was this today?
like an hour and a bit ago.
Nice.
Oh,
So I'm up at the front of Mountsburg, and then we have a reflection. I was like, and I completely lost the plot. So one, furious, embarrassed, but furious. They were so disruptive, getting on the man, da 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 da. And here's the sticky wicket. They were trying not to laugh in church, which is how I started the story. So part of this, I've got to be like, oh no! I created a monster.
You gave them the idea.
I created my own destruction, and then I'm like, okay, we're gonna sing a song, we'll get into the discussion. So I went downstairs, grabbed a coffee, and while they're singing, came up and finished up. And while I was getting a coffee, all I could think of was like the disciples telling the children, get lost, get lost. I go, whoa, 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 whoa. And a whole message on fun. I was so boring that my own kids distracted me and threw off my sermon, and I don't know what to do. Like, I don't know, like, Andy and I were furious. And so Andy's like, she's like, it's so rude. Because we are trying to tell them they're not being great with empathy. They are being rude.
what if
but
they weren't your children? What if they're someone else's children?
Mary Boyd, that is an excellent point, because my immediate thought was like, all right, cut. Like, they were just being kids.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
You've
because that's the
been
thing.
gentle on my children.
Yeah, no, that was bang on, because I'm like, that's exactly right. That is
Yeah.
exactly right.
But the only difference is that you know your children, so you know what they've been taught. Like,
Yep.
if
Yep.
Faith were to do something crazy, and you guys were, and I'd be like,
have
I
higher
taught her not to do that.
expectations of your own
I'm disappointed that she didn't follow my teachings. But if it's something she's never learned before, I'd be like, meh, guess I screwed that one up,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
You forget that they're children because you have a higher expectation because they're yours.
Yeah.
That's right.
But
But
the
I-
expectation comes from knowing what you've poured into it.
Totally.
Like, because that's what I'm struggling through in the middle of right now.
Yeah.
Is I know we've been over this. I know you understand this. I know you seem to care about this, and yet we're very, very clearly not doing this.
Have you not looked down on the congregation and seen people whispering while you're talking?
Yeah.
Same
Is that
thing.
sort of the same thing?
And to that, the faces of everybody when this is all happening today was nothing but acceptance and knowing, smiles and nods. Like, nobody was upset. It's like, yeah, I totally get it. The only ones who were upset were Andy and I. And I mean, to Elle's point, I think, right, like, oh, okay. Because we're trying to find that thing of like, one of the guys said, he's like, the irony of this, the reason that happened is because you were talking about fun, and it wasn't fun. it's like fair point. Hurts, but fair point.
Yeah.
And I had this sense this morning, I'm sitting out on the deck just sort of going over what I want to get, and I never, and this will shock nobody here, I never really have the ending done. And sometimes that's beautiful, because I kind of discovered as we're going. Sometimes it ends up being a rambly thing. But for the most part, it actually feels like a bit of a journey that we share together. And I just couldn't shake the sense. I'm like, I thought it was because I was too tired. It's like, I'm not going to bring a fun energy. But I just had the sense that today was not going to go well. But I did not see that one happening. And the fact that it was the kids. And I told that story about the baptism and you know, how hard it is to stop laughing once you start laughing in church. And then this happens today.
Were they actually, like, did they say something?
I'm gonna
Like,
be-
is that what happened? They were laughing, started laughing, or were they like just sort of talking and it
They
was
were being
escalating?
disruptive and talking beforehand. There's they all had a sleepover last night, so there's that exhaustion capacity. Yeah, exactly. And everybody knows, like, all right, so exhaustion's kind of it. Two, I've told them several times, I'm like, I think it's so important to sit up in church and be bored. It's like, you guys are on screens, and anytime you're bored, you're like, I was like, just be bored. It's 15 minutes, it won't kill you, and it'll give you tools that I don't think a lot of your peers have, and they get that. So that's to your point. Let out a little toot, and that's what set it off. Or was holding it, and see, there's the knowing. I mean, there is no,
That's funny. I'm sorry.
there is no bigger thing of
That's
like.
always funny.
It's always
The
funny.
males that are.
No, it's
So the
And to the
elder
enlightened
of the
females as
room
well.
has advised that it is always funny. It does not
It is
matter
always
how old
funny.
you are.
As long as it doesn't happen to you.
But it did, because it was
You
his
just
choice.
pretend
Okay,
it's not
so-
yours.
So then the question is, can you
look
break
around.
it down that
Yeah,
they
yeah.
will understand the breakdown?
I think so, and I think we've
Because,
done that a little bit.
Like,
Congregation, and they're probably all wondering how you're going to react.
Totally. And that became the thing. I was like, all right, I don't want, because your question is if it was another kid. That's exactly it. I was like, and I don't want my boys to associate in a message where we talk about the fact that sometimes we don't associate Christianity with fun for all the right reasons. I don't want in that moment. That's what I mean. The beauty of this thing is like I feel like this all happened in real time. It's like it wasn't fun, and everything you just said 2 minutes ago is happening now. How are you gonna handle it? And spoiler alert, not super well. It derailed me enough that I think, but this is the conversation. This becomes where it actually becomes real. Because who wants to discuss something that's fun versus I had, and actually Jim just reminded me of this. When I was in Bible college, years and years and years, decades and decades ago, in the dawn of the early days of the age, our Bible college actually had a really wonderful thing. So for 1 week a semester, you had to do like a spiritual retreat for a solid 7 days, and there's a variety of different options you could have. And we had one friend who had adult ADD. I don't know what it was called at the time, but we would call it adult ADD. He could not sit still for more than 10 seconds, and he was one of the funniest guys just to watch, and he was just clearly funny. Anytime anybody would talk about like, well, what about the heresy of this when we were in like a cults class, he'd literally draw a picture of the letter C with hair on it, and he'd hold it up just quietly by himself. Because it's a heresy. It's a heresy. That level of stupidity. But it was ceaselessly amusing. And one of the ones that he went on was a silent retreat. And all of us knew it. Because he had to do 72 hours where we don't speak. I was like, he can't go 72 seconds without speaking. And it was torture, but he's like, I need to depend on God. Like, it was a very, very astute, powerful sort of thing. And so they're up in the Rocky Mountains having this time. He's in all levels of hell because he hasn't been able to talk to anybody. He's not allowed to be around anybody. And he's sitting there trying to meditate with an ADD mind. And he tooted by himself and started to laugh. And then he's like, probably the first real spiritual question and said, he's like, why do we do that? And he's like, it's the only, at that point in life, he's like, it's the only time I feel like I heard from God. And the answer was, because I think they're funny too. And I was like, take whatever you want, but it's like, that was such a weirdly silly, beautiful, touching moment for him that I think you're right. Like when something like that happens in church, how do you not?
well, I mean, unless like Bev said, unless it's you're the one who did it, and your only prayer for a meaningful connection with God is, please don't let anybody know that just happened because that would
Yes.
upset me.
But that's not going to be the realm of 11 to 13-year-old boys. That will not be a thought.
Boys are boys.
Boys are boys, yeah.
Yeah, for
That's
sure.
And at that age, yeah, that's not it. So, but then also trying to make sure that we're trying to increase senses of empathy, minimize rudeness, which they're a little bit too comfortable with being, the center of attention and being rude. So it's this whole balancing of. But I can't get over the fact that it happened in a service where I've
Today.
literally got a puppy as the picture for the service, and then this happens, and it if anything, I should have been like, this is what I'm talking about, and it completely derailed me.
And you know what? To what Mary said, I completely agree. Completely. The only thing is, I think more about it though is, that's to me is sort of like a in the moment thing. Can you please sit up and pay attention while we're talking, like we asked you to at home before we came?
I don't know if it's because I'm a grandparent, I'm older. I think I put less weight on protocol for some reason or the other.
That's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. If you had marched down there and said, boys, straighten up and sit right, what would happen next Sunday when you wanted them to come to church?
Yeah.
You're gonna have a fight on hands because they don't want to. They don't want that.
It's hard for them to be there, period. I
Yeah.
thought.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Especially
for
with their
sure.
father
Yeah.
preaching.
Yep.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
have to bend.
Yeah.
I say you have to bend.
Yeah.
You know,
They can
and
have
yeah,
it.
and plus the fact that the rest of your congregation didn't care.
They didn't.
No.
Yeah, you're right. There's 2 adults that it really
Yeah.
bothered, and then if others actually, as all you did, find it amusing.
Yeah.
And so we got to communicate. What? Say the protocol.
Children
Lenny?
will be
I think
children.
that
I
was.
was on the same line here.
You're
but
running
yeah.
up down the aisles or something, that'd be different, right? Be worse in a way. I have to be careful what I say, not to offend anyone.
No,
No,
But-
you don't.
But I think as we get older, I think we ease up on some of the things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That they're not so important
They aren't
anymore.
important
They're,
anymore, no.
you know, it's like a rule, your kid has to behave in church. Well, they didn't want this to happen, it happened.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting is, so we had a bit of an issue with, so right now at school, every day 5, you get to go to the library and grab a library book. And you can bring it home for a week and you have to bring it back the next time. So we've had 2 weeks out of, let's say 5, where we damaged the book. Not we, collectively. And after the first time, it was explained, like books are valuable, like the one was, it had still the stamp in it from Beverly Central, and it had like and someone had tried to repair it, and like, you can't replace it, it's from a school that's not even there anymore, like, not to mention, they charge you $30 if you ruin the book. Like, you know, so after the first time, books are important, don't ruin books, blah, 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 blah. Next week we're good, week after, not so much. So I emailed the teacher and I said, would it be okay? No, actually I said, I tried to fix it, I hope it's okay. If it's not, please have the librarian let me know, we will replace it. I have said you can't have a book out this week because of this. I'm sorry for saying that before checking with you because you're the teacher and for all I know the kids have to take a book or something, but if you can help me enforce this, would you please? The response I got from this teacher made me feel a little less crazy. She just said, thank you. She said, so many parents just
Let it go.
aren't watching and they aren't, and it seems stupid because it's a library book, but it's the tiniest part, the tiniest pebble in a rock garden. And so I think that's what happens, because I can't imagine 6-year-old me caring about that. Right? And goodness, I hope 80-year-old me thinks it's hilarious and is like, here, just take some money and buy more books, I'm good. Right? Like, but I think while you're living it, while you're going through it, I haven't experienced it yet. I don't know what the implication is. You're on the other side and you can say, the library books are gonna be okay, right? But I'm still over here like building up to it, and if we don't experience it, then it's harder to move forward, right? And so I think it's like, I don't want to say a privilege to get to the point where you can let go of stuff like that, but it means you've done something right. Maybe you don't have to micromanage anything anymore, because the children you raised, and from what I know of all the ones here, oh my God, especially like Katie, you were on
I'm
it.
sure they did naughty
Nothing?
things.
You were on
Naughty
it. You were
things.
with it. And now all your hard work paid off. You
Our
now
kids
have
or us?
wonderful kids.
Your children,
I'm just looking for clarification.
your children, I'm sure your
Your children.
children did naughty things. I know my children did naughty things.
I did naughty things.
My daughters say to
They'd be
me,
boring if they didn't.
my daughters say, I don't know how you raised the 3 of us. Like,
But-
Isn't that the great? That's the great premise thing. It's like, oh, it's come full circle.
But imagine if you had let go the things that now you're looking back and saying whatever, they wouldn't be the same girls. They wouldn't have the same character. They wouldn't know the same, because
but I,
sometimes security is like a weighted blanket. If you let someone free reign and say do whatever, like that's okay.
Oh, that's terrible.
No, but
once they're out of my sight, they did free
it's not.
rein. I'm sorry to say.
Yeah.
You still created
happens.
it.
That's right, it happened,
Misconception that rules aren't security.
They're not always
Sometimes
thinking, oh,
rules
mom
show
and dad
love.
don't like that.
I love you enough to spend the time to fix this. I love you enough to
That's
hold you
right.
back from that.
But
right?
sometimes you have to let them experience it for themselves. You can only tell them so many times, and they don't understand until they experience. Like
Yeah.
Yeah,
like Heather, when
true.
she was starting to drive, and she was heading off somewhere, and I told her, careful by Nimmy John's. The snow blows over there, it gets really deep. And I know, Dad.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, they
Ten-
know everything.
10 minutes later.
10 minutes later, Dad, I'm in the ditch.
Why did-
Where are you?
Yeah,
By
yeah,
Nimmy John's.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, sometimes just have to
how they
learn for
learn.
themselves that it
I
didn't
like-
work too good.
I think in some ways we've talked about the gospel.
Happens,
Just like if somebody in a great space
yeah,
sharing that,
too.
but then also the relaxing of the protocols. Isn't that an element of the gospel? Isn't that what Jesus says? Like, you've heard it said, but I'm saying, if you're stuck on this, if you're stuck on you need to have all this water, to wash yourself off from the dirtiness of others. That's the exact water, because there's clearly other water sources. That's the water I'm going to turn into wine, because for the Jewish people, a bridal feast is a symbol of unity in God, unity with each other. It's about people coming together. It's a communal thing. It's celebration. So even up to the point of the communion, what did he say at the end? He's like, I can't wait to partake of this in my Father's kingdom again. So there's a sense of like, here's what actually matters. And I had a wonderful, to Elle's point, I think the battle that happened this morning was in my own mind of, I don't super care, because they were trying to be quiet, and I went, but what caught me was, I want to make sure I'm not, well, I want to make sure that I had the preconceived notions of how this is going to affect everybody else, that I've got to shut that down. And when those two worlds came together, it kind of clashed and blew up and knocked the whole thing down. Yeah. And you're right, when I looked out over the faces of everybody at the church, as I'm doing with you here, all I see is smiles and knowing nods.
Yeah.
If I just let it go for a few seconds, it just would have gone.
Yeah.
You did go down for coffee, you did go down to
Reset.
Yep.
And try to get back.
Yeah.
And then I was also preconceived about, this is what in order for this to be a message, I have to say this. And when I went down for the coffee, I'm like, why on earth do I feel like it has to get here and be X amount of minutes? I'm like, I could have just been like, and here we are. Like this conversation right now, this actually feels close. This is actually what makes the fun sacred.